And there was war in heaven, and Michael and his angels fought against the dragon.
Welcome to our 8th installment of our Holiday Crisis Identity Tango series. And, well, today we're not talking about the feasts. I was just talking during our lunch, and I think it's important to clarify it again and again. We don't keep the feasts, because when you say the word feast, it relates to the temple. And what I see very often, people who oppose any of this, they oppose it on the ground that all these Christians who try to keep the Old Testament rituals. Well, it's the problem sometimes. The opposing side often doesn't care to find out. And I still would like to ask the opposing side, Passover Seder, which we talked about a couple days ago. What kind of an Old Testament ritual is it? As you can see, the principle for the holidays is very clear as we progress in studying. We follow the example of Jesus. If Passover was good for Jesus, it's good for me. Passover Seder, well, Pentecost. We don't have any special, Seder or something for Pentecost. It's just a very nice event celebrating the giving of the Torah. And for the people who consider themselves keeping the commandments of God and having the faith of Jesus, how could they even ignore the holiday that deals with the commandments of God? This is not wise. Yeah, as we talked yesterday, we're not going to look into Leviticus 23 and try to find some way to grow wheat over the spring, build a hothouse, and I don't know if a wheat would even grow in a box in a hothouse, but, something. This is not about it. This is about the wonderful message of the covenant and learning about the covenant. And actually, it is that particular message about learning about the covenant of God that is actually balances out the Christianity, which sees Pentecost as purely sensual thing where you get some feelings and you think that's how you get baptized by the Holy Spirit. Sorry, this is not about the feeling when we talk about the baptism with the Holy Spirit. Anyway, we've studied this. What I would like us to look today doesn't appear in Leviticus 23 at all. Purim. What is Purim? For some people, this word is not familiar. These imagery could be very new. Am I right for some of you? Do you know what this is? That is called Hamantash, or as they call it in Hebrew in Israel, Oznei Aman, which means the ears of Haman. So yeah, that's, that's when, it's a nice holiday. And what is this? That's Groger. That is something you give to the children. When you read here the book of Esther, and when children hear the word Haman or Haman, they'll do in those grogers. That's what Purim is. And then you may wonder, what's that supposed to be? These kind of clown costumes. What do they have to do with the Bible? Well, for someone, it could be a brainstorm. Because, for the Jews, it's very familiar imagery, You put it in Jewish audience, nobody's going to give you any kind of question, Yeah, we know. But if you put it into some Christian audiences, especially, and I'll be talking about, I got the type of question which I expected I'll get. How do I tell my Jewish friend that we do the Passover? I'll touch on this during this lecture. But I know that there are quite a number of very sincere Christian people who are trying to learn about the holidays one way or another, because many of them, and I very sympathize with them, they're pretty much sick and tired of this kind of pseudo-religious paganism, which is very popular in our society, with all this so-called holidays, which are very far from the Bible. And they're trying to live more biblical life. But the people like this, what I've noticed, they're so far apart from Jewish experience. And these images, yes, they're new to them. So, buckle up and let's go to the Bible and see what the Purim is. So, and especially, why are these dress-ups? So, hold on and we'll learn. So, I'm reading the book of Esther, chapter 9. This was on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th of the month, they rested and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Okay, let's stop here for a moment. I don't have the picture of Hebrew calendar like I used before, but the month of Adar is basically the last month of the winter. And, well, they're not going the same way as we're used to. We're using here in a normal life what is known as Gregorian calendar. And a Jewish calendar does not line up with Gregorian months. So approximately Adar happens between February and March. And we kind of discussed it before about the calendar. And we know, I've noticed, I've told you about how a leap year in Jewish calendar is actually created. We have leap year when we have February 29. A leap year is to catch up, to make sure that our earth is indeed making a full circle around the sun. But in Jewish calendar, it's a little different. The leap year is made by periodically every, I keep forgetting, it's like 6 times or 4 times per 19 years. Anyway, you can Google it. Anyway, but you understand the principle. It's done by adding extra month, the entire month. And I would remind you that we talked about the winter months are Adar, then you go backwards, you have Shavat, and then you have Teveth. In the months of Teveth, we have Hanukkah, and we'll talk about the Hanukkah too. But Shavat, it's kind of like a mid-dead winter, which of course in Israel it's very similar to here. Rain, 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 and the snow on elevations. But in that mid of the dead of winter, rabbis of Sanhedrin have to go out to the fields and inspect how barley is doing. Because if you remember yesterday, you count your Shavuot from the first barley sheaf. And it's supposed to be on during the Pesach, during the Passover weekend. So if your barley is not going to ripen by the Passover weekend, you're going to mess up your calendar. So the way how they did it, they would look at the barley sprouts and they would evaluate whether it's high enough to ripen within the 2-month period or they need extra month. And that's when they add extra month. So that's about the month of Adar. There are years where you have Adar 1 and Adar 2. So the 14th of Adar, it's just dead in the middle of the month. That's during the full moon. And so let's keep reading. So they made it a day of feasting and gladness. And they even rested on that day. Yeah. Notice they did not declare it as the Sabbath. But they rested on this day. Because it's a holiday. You know, why do you want to go work on a holiday unless you have to? Okay? So, but the Jews who were in Shushan assembled together on the 13th day as well as on the 14th. And on the 15th day of the month, they rested and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore, the Jews of the villages who dwelt in unwalled towns celebrated the 14th day of the month of Adar with gladness and feasting as a holiday and for sending presents to one another. Yeah! Yeah, that's Jewish Christmas. I expected somebody would say it. I expected that. You see what Purim is? Purim is a Jewish Christmas. Jews do not give any gifts for December 25 and do not put it under any tree. Because, yes, there is a day for the gifts. It is Purim. And it's official. Hanukkah is, let's put it this way. We'll talk about Hanukkah, but there are because of the influence of Christmas and commerce and stuff like this, Jewish kids are becoming very spoiled, and they receive the Hanukkah gifts. Because guess what? You go to school, all your Christian classmates receive Christmas gift, and you receive bupkis, as they say in New York? No, that's not fair. We're going to give a Hanukkah gift. Well, there's no such a thing in the Bible. The Bible tells us about Purim. That's when everybody gives each other gifts. That's the Bible. I can't do anything about it. That's the Bible. Well, how in the world are you going to argue that Jesus nailed that to the cross? The gifts to the cross? No! You see where I'm going with? So, you may want to do something like this. Get additional gifts. And by the way, you're not going to get into any kind of Christmas mall fever. You get much better deals in March if you shop for gifts on Purim. Just a little home economics. All right, so let's keep reading. We're in Esther chapter 9, and Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters to all Jews near and far, who were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, to establish among them that they should celebrate yearly, yearly, 14th and 15th day of the month of Adar. You see who established this holiday? Here's a name behind it. Mordecai. He did it. Okay? So he basically, apparently the book of Esther was written by, co-authored by both Esther and Mordecai. And apparently here Mordecai writes the letter, make it a holiday, 2 days. So in which the Jews had rest from their enemies as a month which was turned from sorrow to joy for them, and from mourning to holiday, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, and sending presents to one another, and gifts to the poor. Oh, charity. Not only to one another, but to the poor. So, well, I tell you, the idea of Christmas gifts, where does it coming from? I tell you where. From King Henry VIII. I'll talk more about this, but yeah, that's where we get eventually the Christmas gift tradition. That's not from the Bible. It's King Henry VIII, because that's when he was received in his palace at Hampton Court. The nobles vowed their loyalty, and they would bring the gifts to the king. And then he would, of course, give something to the crowd who loved and cheered. And that's why English people begin to love their Christmas and love their king, the new head of the Church of England. And as I mentioned earlier, Puritans came up. They didn't want to have anything with it. They had none of it. So in America, Puritans first, they banned Christmas left and right. And they held on their fort of anti-Christmas until the Golden Rush. That changed. The new people came. They wanted gold. They wanted Christmas. That's how it goes. So Jews accepted the custom which they began as Mordecai had written to them. So they called these days Purim, after the name Pur, therefore because all the words of this letter that they had seen concerning this matter, what happened to them. Pur is a lot. And we'll talk about this just a little bit later in our presentation. But the word pur means lot. And the lot was cast actually by in front of Haman, if you recall, to establish the date or to appoint the date when Jews would be murdered. So the Jews established and imposed it upon themselves and their descendants. And look at this. And all who joined them. You see? Not only themselves and their descendants, but all who joined them. Now let me go to this question. How do you explain to your Jewish friend that you do the Passover? Easy. A Jew needs to be your real friend. For real. Then you have no problem explaining. Because they, this is where my biggest, I would say, worry about people who are trying to do a homegrown things by trying to find something on the internet about the Passover, and some teachers are teaching them things on the internet, and it's very, very, very difficult to check the credentials of these people and the facts that they're given. But the major test here, are these people positive about Jews or negative about Jews? Well, throughout these lectures we saw, and we will see more, there are certain things that I really love about Judaism and believe it's very good. And there are certain things that are not biblical in Judaism. And I tell it right away. This is not biblical. Probably we shouldn't be doing it. But it's very important for us to see this principle. See, Purim is not Levitical holidays. But here it gives you a principle. It's open for anyone, not only who is born Jewish, but the one who is willing to join, sympathize with Jewish cause, support Jewish people, respect Jewish heritage. Unfortunately, what I see, there are many well-meaning Christians who try to keep the feast, but the teachers they listen on the internet, they're so disrespectful about Judaism. They consider themselves, these people consider themselves as the ultimate source of knowledge, as the ultimate discoverers of biblical truth, and they treat all rabbis basically indiscriminate, like just a bunch of fools who went astray from God. In this case, as someone with this kind of spirit does the Passover, the problem is, I always, are Jewish people your friends or some kind of adversaries whom we need to straighten out because they're so bad and they're stiff-necked and they're not the spirit, the attitude. Yes, if you want to know more about the Passover, when we do the Passover Seder, come and see what we do. And I think if you didn't get our Haggadah, you may ask our ushers, and we may provide a copy of the Haggadah for you guys if you are here for the first time. But you'll see not everything in this Haggadah is an automatic copy of what Orthodox Judaism does today, but we strive to first of all, give credit to these rabbis for the work of preserving the Bible and the Bible knowledge. And then we discover throughout the studies that Jesus, first and foremost being Jewish by himself, didn't really make any kind of revolution, cultural revolution. Many things that were customary in the first century Judaism, Jesus did. So this is why that phrase, all who would join them, the phrase is biblical. Today, of course, that's where I would kind of draw my line here, because, I believe what Paul teaches. There are some synagogues, some rabbis say, you got to go through traditional conversion. Well, we know what Paul speaks about that, and he speaks, when we studied that, you're circumcised without the hands by the circumcision of Jesus, so you're not obligated to go. You don't have to, you don't need to, I don't know how else to say, to go through conversion, but join, sympathize, support. Yeah, this holiday is for people like you. If you are not Jewish by birth, but you are supporting Jewish people. And it is not Levitical feast, but it's in the Bible, and it's a part of the Bible. So, that without fail, they should celebrate these 2 days every year according to the written instruction and according to the prescribed time, that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city, that those days, Purim, should not fail to be observant among the Jews, and that the memory of them should not perish among their descendants. Very clear. And again, we just spent enough time. Why should Christians be joining Jews in this? That's what Paul seems to be talking about. Just because Paul's argument, and that's the conclusion of his argument, and if you are Christ, then you are Abraham's seed. So why should it be foreign and detestful or repugnant if it's what Jews were doing? And it's in the Bible. If it would not be in the Bible, it'd be a different thing. But it's in the Bible. So, maybe good. The question is, what is Purim and how do we do it? The question I ask, is Purim a carnival? Well, some people think that way. Because people dress in costumes. Wow, that's an interesting opportunity. But what I want to do right now, I want to show you the difference between the Purim costumes. So, just interesting tradition. If you want to do a costumes, that's a nice place time and place to do costumes. Look, the Bible is not against fun. It isn't, truly. But so as you can see, there are many, and there are some bright costumes. These are, of course, on the street. I think it looks to me like Ashdod in Israel. Well, I had a hard time finding good images of that kind of carnival. So let's not dwell on them. But you know what carnival is all about? Carnival comes from the Latin word carne, flesh. You know why? Unlike Purim, and I will explain why Purim they put in the masks just a little later. Hang on a little bit. But unlike Purim, the carnival was designed to indulge your flesh into a nice things before you go to Lent. Well, the Lent, it's in a Catholic Christian tradition. The Lent is basically an attempt to imitate the 40 days and the 40 nights of Jesus's experience in the desert. Well, you can't fast for 40 days and 40 nights, so you just limit what you eat, and there are certain things. Orthodox tradition has one set of food you're barred from eating. The Catholic tradition has another set of food which you're barred from eating. And so the Lent is where you sort of limit yourself from these kind of foods before the Easter. Well, and before you go into such a treacherous time for you, you need to have fun. Russians know how to have fun. Do you see that? I tell you, I can't do that. But this is the Russian feast of parting with winter. It's called Maslenitsa. You know why Maslenitsa? Because of the word maslo means butter. And what do you do crepes with? Lots of butter. That's what it is all about. But besides that, you're burning this kind of idol of the winter god. And that's all nice and good. As soon as you burn this idol, then you go into the Easter mood and you start thinking of a passion of Christ. You see? Well, I think you guys can recognize what this carnival is all about. And when this happens, and you see that Purim is not. So, what is this whole idea of feasting and joy all about? Well, let's take a quick review of the book of Esther. And it starts with the words, "Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus." I have a hard time pronouncing this in English because his name is Ahasuerus. I don't know which one is harder for you. But Ahasuerus, it's Persian, and it seems to be more palatable, at least for me. But who is this Ahasuerus? So let's take a look at a timeline. And a timeline here is very important. So you see, 540 BC, this is the span. This is the 6th century, this is the 5th century BC. That's the time when Babylon fell. See, the King Cyrus, the Babylon falls, followed by Cambyses, and here is this long reign of Darius I, who eventually allowed to rebuild the temple. You see, during the Cyrus, when Babylon fell, the book of Isaiah, prophet Isaiah, in chapter 41, calls Cyrus the anointed of God. Actually, Actually, it's a wonderful miracle that a prophet was able to tell the name of the person, a king, 150 years beforehand. So this is the indication of really, predictive ability of prophetic book of the Bible. This is how God works. So the book of Ezra, chapter 1, as well as the last chapter of the book 2nd Chronicle, tells us that Cyrus gives edict. This edict allows Jews who were captured previously by Nebuchadnezzar and carried to Babylonian captivity. It gives them a permission to return from Babylon and rebuild the temple. As you can see, here is more of a detailed picture, and that's kind of a timeline of when things happen. So this is the infamous Nebuchadnezzar and the 3 deportation. That's the first deportation, 605 BC. That's the second deportation, and that's the fall of Jerusalem. And since then, the prophet Daniel, here is his time. This particular chart misses Ezekiel, who lives together with Daniel. Now the King Cyrus comes, and so for about, we have almost 20 years, that's when the temple is rebuilt. A small group of people led by Zerubbabel, as it describes in the book of Ezra, came from Babylonia and enduring horrible hardship with the help of prophet Haggai and Zechariah were able to accomplish the task and rebuild the temple. But unfortunately, as we can see, the book of Esther shows that in Shushan, the citadel or the capital of Medo-Persia, there was a Jew whose name was Mordecai. And as we read throughout the book of Esther, quite a large number of Jews lived across Persia. It means that these Jews did not follow the edict of Cyrus. They did not accept the prophecy of Isaiah as the magnificent deliverance and did not go out of Babylon as God told them to do. And so this was a time. Now, Shushan and King Ahasuerus. Who is that? I go here. So we have Cyrus, Cambyses, Darius the first, Xerxes. That's how he is called. King Ahasuerus is Xerxes. You see, it's very, very, very important to put the book of Esther in its proper historical context. So you got Xerxes here, and take a look. This is where this chart, I think it makes sense, shows where Esther becomes the queen. It's 479, 478. Do you see what happens? This is a problem. This is a dilemma. Jewish community is split between those who returned from captivity and those who did not return from captivity. And it looks like the majority didn't care about returning from captivity. They didn't want to go back and restore the old parents' house. It's like you've grown up on the farm and your grandparents a city kid, and suddenly you know about your grandpa farm, and nobody lives in this house, and now somebody is going to force you to go back into the country, into this whatever is left of that grandpa's farmhouse, and rebuild it. Most likely, especially when there was a fire and you have just a foundation. Man, you wouldn't want to do this. You want to live your job. If you have a secure job, why in the world? This is how many of them felt. Capital Shushan was giving them opportunity. Judea was desolate, economically depressed area. People didn't want to move. Yes, their grandparents, because look, take a look at the timeline. So here is the Cyrus, and here is Esther. This is 480. This is 539. How many years? Almost 80 years. 80 years is 3 generations. This is what I'm talking to you about the grandparents. So Mordecai, it's his, how many generations ago, either here or here, it's his great, his ancestors, let's put it this way, his ancestors were forced to come to Babylon, how many years? Literally 120 years. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of time. Mordecai didn't connect. You have to really have a leap of faith in God to be like Zerubbabel. Literally, God really talked to Zerubbabel to make him go. You have to really follow the Bible, rely on God to actually make this move. And there are many who just didn't. They just didn't. Well, but that's the story. So, Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, Benjaminite. Kish had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives who had been captured with Jeconiah, the king of Judah. So that is our second deportation, 597. Okay? Whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And Mordecai had brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman was lovely and beautiful, and when her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. And I just showed you one of the illustrations. This is what is called Megillat Esther. Megillat literally means a small scroll. And in our congregation, Beit, Shalom, Balevav, we do have a little scroll of Esther, which we read at the appropriate time. But why did I make this such an unusual title here in the slide? Satire? Yes, my friends, yes. The book of Esther is a big biblical satire. Actually, a political satire. God is using this instrument. He is using that kind of laughter. When I say political satire, you can see this kind of today different cartoons, I remember in the, especially many Jewish papers, they love cartoons, satirical cartoons. When I was studying in Cincinnati at Hebrew Union College, and many Jews there, Reformed Jews, they were politically aligned with the Democrats, and so it was a Bush era. And boy, they would go at Bush with all kinds of satirical cartoons. Guess what? The book of Esther is nothing else but satirical cartoons. What God is doing, He is utilizing laughter. Remember that Mordecai was the one who authored the book. We read about this. So, what is Mordecai doing? He is ridiculing himself. Is it, for some of you, it may be strange, but not for the Jews. Jews love laughter. That's why Purim is a holiday with lots of laughter. Rabbis say that we can laugh as much as we want to over the book of Esther because no single time, not once, the name of God is ever used in this book. Do you know why? If you understand this book in its historic context, you will discover that God is in the book of Ezra and the book of Nehemiah. Why? Because He is with those who went through the desert back to their homeland, which they never seen and couldn't even imagine how it looked like, because it was grandparents who were taken out to Babylonian captivity, but they just faithfully went and followed God. And they were building the temple. And so God raised prophets, Haggai and Zechariah, and then later Malachi, intentionally to support His people. It is interesting, when we look at the history of Israel in the biblical time, starting from the time of Solomon, we always have prophets. Elijah, Elisha, Isaiah, Jeremiah. What all these prophets do? They admonish people of Israel for their bad ways. They're always very strict and hard on their countrymen. In Zechariah and Haggai, there is no single word of admonition. These people have enough. These people needed support. They're resisted by all kinds of enemies of Israel and Judah. And that's why the prophet Zechariah is all for Israel. He's encouraging the high priest Yehoshua, the son of Jehozadak, to stand firm. Haggai is encouraging Zerubbabel to keep building and not to quiver. That's all they do. God is there. But in Shushan, where Mordecai is looking for best job opportunity, God isn't there. And when look at the chapter 1 and see all the satirical elements which were put in describing the feast that King Xerxes, Ahasuerus, did, and how he got upset with his wife who refused to show up, and how he is asking all his advisors what to do with such a disobedient wife, and how he was drunk and not thinking. You realize this is all meant. There is lots of element of political satire and ridicule. So Mordecai does ridicule Xerxes, the pagan king, but he ridicules himself because he knows he deserves it. He knows that, well, he was looking for opportunity. And suddenly opportunity arrived. Here he has this girl, the niece, and he doesn't know what to do with her. Marrying her off, well, who knows? Looking for some good Jewish suitors. Here comes the king needing a nice girl. Hadassah, Hadassah, go, go, go into the harem. Is this Jewish? Nah. And the main thing. Here is the punchline of the entire political satire, which is in chapter 1 through chapter 5. This is all written in a very, very tongue-in-cheek language. Esther had not revealed her people or family for Mordecai. It was Mordecai's idea, had charged her not to reveal it. Oh boy, Mordecai got his nice career move. He is now a father-in-law to the king of the largest empire in the world. Wow. Can you imagine to be an in-law to our president? That would make you something. You would have expectation, at least of something. He had expectations too, but they were dashed. Because instead, God has a sense of humor. Instead of being promoted to a nice, cushy government job, who was promoted? Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite. What's that Agagite? Well, let's think a little bit into the history. Agag, does it ring the bell? Mm-hmm. It was the king of Amalekites. Now, do you happen to remember who Mordecai was? Which tribe was he? 1 second. Benjaminite. And his most distant ancestor happened to, who was taken to Babylonian captivity. What was his name according to Esther 2 verse 4? No, Kish. Oh, what do you know about the son of Kish the Benjaminite? It's the King Saul. And what exactly is common between King Saul and the Agagites? It was the King Saul whom God charged with mission to destroy the Amalekites. And Amalekites were a group of very nasty people. And so God knew what he was doing. But Saul failed to do what he was supposed to do. As a result of Saul's failure, God basically told him to resign. Saul refused to resign. He was chasing David left and right until he ended up with the witch of Endor, which got him eventually killed. Well, aside from Saul, as you see, a very unpleasant surprise. Instead of the father-in-law, king is choosing understand the way how things turn out. We laugh, but now we tremble. Because, of course, the son of Kish would not bow down to the son of Agag. Especially if that son of Agag took away what he thought, the Mordecai thought, was supposed to belong to him. As a result, the son of Agag had a power. He received a clearance from the king in the form of the signet ring, which gave him an authority and capability to send letters throughout the whole Medo-Persian Empire, which actually stretched out from Pakistan on the east down to Egypt in southwest. That's a huge territory. The ancient world did not have such a huge empire, such a vast empire before. That's big country. And so they employed all kinds of ways and messengers throughout the empire, and guess what? Jews lived everywhere. Through Isaiah, entire section of the book of Isaiah, chapter 48, 49, Isaiah, 180 years before what was going to transpire now, was writing fervently, passionately about how God would protect Jews on their return from Babylon. When Isaiah wrote these lines, Jews had no idea what Babylon was and where he was. It took King Manasseh, King Josiah, Prophet Jeremiah, and all these events over 100 years before the biggest and dangerous empire in the east became an imminent threat to Judea. And that imminent threat was realized as Jeremiah predicted. And Jews were carried into captivity. But the words of Isaiah, for those who were carried into captivity, who saw the burning temple and the destroyed Babylon, they were supposed to be the encouragement, the hope. Well, for those who learned to live a cushy lifestyle in the capital Shushan, these words were not relevant. But suddenly, the things changed. Mordecai puts now a sackcloth and calls to all Jews to start praying. Boy, oh boy, sometimes we do need a little shake-up before we decide that there is no one else who can save us but God. Isn't this a sad truth? But that's exactly where a satire begins to turn into something really serious. Because all this time, beloved wife of King Xerxes did everything in her power to hide her identity. Now her people are under imminent threat of extinction, and now she has to reveal her identity. Well, I think now you understand why Jews love mosques on the Purim. Because Halloween, although I'm pretty sure there are some who do, but in reality was not meant to replace Halloween or any European carnivals before the Lent. It was meant to actually remind of Jewish people, well, hiding your identity was a bad choice. Hiding your identity is the bad choice, and that's what masks symbolize. You try to hide your identity to discover that mask really doesn't help much. Esther had to admit to the king, and of course the miracle happened, and Haman was destroyed, and Jews had a joy and gladness. And this is why this holiday is still in. If we understand its deep spiritual significance, in the Christian experience, I think Jesus has some very interesting words that would resonate with what we just discovered studying the book of Esther. You are the light to the world. And let your light shine. Hiding identity is not a productive way. Jews tried to stay in comfortable conditions. They tried to mimic the life of the pagan capital, and where they got to a threat of destruction. Until they made a choice to open up and face who they are. Do you realize how Purim is connected with the title of our lecture series? Identity crisis. Well, I will remind what we started with. People today have serious identity crisis. But we don't have to. We don't have to go through any kind of identity crisis and identity search. We don't have to order any kind of 23andMe and other DNA tests to discover who we are. God gives us wonderful identity. We are His people. It is not how we are born and who our ancestors are. It is how we choose to live. If we choose to join with the people of God, then this holiday is good for us. This holiday is good for us to learn about who we are. And a little bit of a costume party for children won't hurt, especially when it's done in the context of biblical story. Unfortunately, I know that for many Christians, Purim is very hard to stomach. It is because for many generations, Christians were taught to oppose Jews on every step. This is the main entrance into the Notre Dame de Paris. And why I like this picture? Because it has, why I took this picture, because there is a unique sculptures here which frame this kind of arc on a door. You see this woman and this woman. Take a look at this woman. you'll find out what this comes. Look at this woman's stature. Nice, strong, right? Look at this woman. You see, what can you tell about her stature? Let me show you a close-up. What is she wearing? It's a Jewish funny hat, which many European cities demanded Jews to wear to be recognizable. Talking about the identity. It couldn't hide. For Jew, it was forbidden to hide his identity in the European city of Middle Ages. I tell you one thing, America is the blessed country. America is the only country in the world where a Jew actually, if he doesn't want to identify himself as a Jew, can just be a normal, can blend in and don't have to tell anybody. There is no questionnaire that would legally find out, or nobody's going to be even looking for that. It is interesting that it is in America that there are so many people are now trying to identify themselves with Jewish people. For me, a Soviet Jew, Eastern European background, who lived through, whose ancestors lived through pogroms, and by the way, about 70% of American Jews ended up here on this soil between 1890 and 1913, and they come from Russian Empire. Many countries are no longer Russia. Poland was a part of Russian Empire. Lithuania was a part of Russian Empire. Of course, Ukraine, Belarus, whatsoever. But it was all Russian Empire, and what did Jews do? They were fleeing the pogroms, mass massacres that were happening after the murder of the Russian Emperor Alexander II, which was pinned on Jews absolutely unfairly, but it was a political decision. A political decision invented by the Russian Orthodox Church, because in Russian Empire, Tsar was a messiah, and they couldn't sell it to Russian public. There was Russian newly born communists who were doing the terrorist activity, and Russian people could not kill their Tsar. It's Jews who did it, and that's what instigated mass pogroms and murders and whatever, and people started to go, and they ended up here in America. This is why 70% of American Jews, they come from Russian Empire, and between, their ancestors come between 1890 and 1913. And so, yeah, but going back in Europe, even if you wanted to hide your Jewish identity, you could not. You could not. One way or another, you would be found out. You may think, oh, just become a Christian. And some people think, oh, wow, maybe it's because Jews did not believe in Jesus. Only if they became a Christian would be different. I have to disappoint you in this kind of reasoning, because during the Holocaust, in Germany, the first thing that Hitler did, he obliged all the churches to declare their Jewish membership and disfellowship them. After Jews were disfellowshipped from Christian churches, Hitler was shipped them to the concentration camps. And the ones who resisted such a move, particularly a very famous Christian man, Lutheran Bishop Dietrich Bonhoeffer, I hope you heard this name, He died in concentration camp himself, trying to protect the Jewish parishioners who were Christians. So Christianity wouldn't save. In Europe, couldn't hide your identity. It couldn't hide your identity. So take a look at this woman. I will divulge what this composition actually means. It means church and synagogue. The church is victorious, and the synagogue is downtrodden. What is she having here? Her staff is down, right? But take a compare. What is this woman having in her right hand? A cup. Cup and the cathedral. What kind of connection do you think is here? Yeah, it's a communion cup. That's the church. The crown, the scepter, communion. Now, take a careful look at what this woman holds in her right hand. Tablets with law. Tablets with law. And how they are? Downward. About to be pitched out. Isn't this remarkable? Reflection of what Christianity taught. And this composition is still teaching that message. Church overcame synagogue and destroyed the law. Well, in that type of context, as a Bible-believing people, wanting to follow the commandments of God, with which of these two women would you align your identity? Think about it. Think about it when you are thinking of holiday and identity crisis. Yes, there is some message of Jesus here. I'm very careful about saying some message of Jesus. And there is absolutely no Jesus here. But of course, there is no Jesus here because how could any Jesus be even known here if the Jesus which is here is so distorted that people reject it? The Jesus here is the one that rejects the commandments. He himself said, if you love me, keep my commandment. So how can we judge Jews in the Middle Ages for not accepting Jesus if they had no way of knowing who Jesus was? What I'm telling you now is my personal quest for my Messiah. Because I always identified myself with this. And even though today I believe in Jesus as my Messiah, I still identify myself here. It was a big of a struggle for me to accept him, identifying myself with here. Because I was asking myself questions, I was praying, how come the Bible prophecy talk about this man, Jesus of Nazareth, and how come none of the rabbis were able to see that? Am I the smartest among the smartest? I couldn't bear this kind of thinking. Few times in my life God talked to me. And I believe it was God who told me back then, 27 years ago, 28 years ago that night, when I was riding on the train trying to sleep, and my head was full of inner struggle. Don't worry. There was no way for these people in the Middle Ages even to know about who Jesus was. Stay who you are and accept the new light. For someone like me, that was the challenge. Maybe for someone sitting here today, the challenge is different. Maybe for someone sitting here, there is an eternal struggle, there is an inner struggle. Said, how can I identify myself with people about whom I all my life heard that they're stiff-necked and rejecting Jesus and so forth? Accept the light of the Bible. Accept the light of the Bible. And that's the answer. Because the Bible teaches us that there is no other people of God. Yes, there are many among those people of God who don't follow, so it's everywhere. But look at the Bible and see the example that Jesus shows. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, in this day and age, when we have a hard time trying to properly identify ourselves, let us focus on your word, on your Holy Scripture, using your example and your revelation. Amen.